Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Reedy, and I'm representing the Strategic Studies Department here at JSOU. Today, we're pleased to present a conversation with a distinguished faculty member, including audience Q&A. This session is unclassified and will be recorded and posted to the JSOU network. Keep in mind that views and opinions expressed by all participants do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policy of the U.S. Government, Department of Defense, or JSOCOM. Since unsettled weather or other technical interruptions have a chance of occurring if you lose connection, just rejoin the session. If the internet fails you, you can always dial in. We're taking a departure from regular programming to talk about education initiatives during COVID. And to do that, we'll highlight the example from a team that is charged with developing people to think differently and manage complex problems. Today's moderator is Mr. Kerry Roberts, outreach faculty at JSOU, and he will introduce the program and today's guest.
Thanks, Frank, and good morning to everyone. I want to welcome everyone to another online interview of Think JSOU. Think JSOU is an ongoing program that explores research and publications of JSOU faculty, resident senior fellows, leading academics, and the wider SOF and international security community. The online collection includes interviews and conversations with authors and researchers and is intended to supplement existing publications, articles, and other active discussions. I encourage everyone to explore the complete Think JSOU collection by reviewing our online offerings posted to the Strategic Studies Department page through our library on the All Partner Access Network, or APAN, and JSOU social media sites. Today, we would like to welcome Dr. Ben Zweibelson, one of the lead educators and facilitators for design and innovation here at JSOU. A retired U.S. Army infantry officer and a veteran of multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Ben has provided design education across JSOCOM, the Department of Defense, and the U.S. government, academia, and industry, as well as internationally for the past decade. Ben has established design courses addressing basic design, advanced design, and military real-world application at all levels of classification for multiple JSOCOM organizations and has lectured at multiple war colleges, as well as numerous design conferences and workshops. He is widely published with military design articles in many defense publications, as well as multiple book projects and monographs. Ben, it's great to have you with us this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kerry.
Great. So you've managed and you've developed and you've implemented a number of courses here at JSOU, Ben, and in the DoD and foreign courses as well. So we'd like to probe your mind today to the benefit and edification of all of us about how the outbreak of COVID-19 has affected the design and execution of virtual courses for good and ill. So let's first talk about the context of digital content and public-facing platforms at JSOU prior to COVID-19. So what efforts and initiatives were you involved in, and how would you rate their effectiveness?
So about 2 years ago, 2018, we overhauled all the design courses and we broke with the previous way, which was very familiar to most PMA platforms. You do a lesson, then you do some design exercises, then you have a bathroom break, and then you do more lessons, and it's kind of this iterative process. And we implemented what's called a flipped classroom. And so we moved every single lesson online. It's on our Blackboard. It involves interactive learning. It's got exercises. It's got videos of us talking and all kinds of things. And so that freed up the entire class period so that our students would actually be doing nothing but design facilitation the entire time they were with our team. And then they would do the learning offsite. We also started building lectures, lessons, podcasts, videos, interviews, all that's available at Think JSOU right now on the YouTube channel. So when COVID hit, we had all of our content online, but what we couldn't do, what we were challenged with was, well, how do we do the design group learning? How do we do the design experience now that we're doing it sort of like this? And basically this was a conversation we had in March of 2020. So by April 1st, we launched 2 initiatives. The first was we created a 6-week online blended distance learning course for design fundamentals. We call that the SOC 1440. It's available to all SOCOM students. We actually are doing our first international SOF iteration of that. It started this Monday. And that is a 6-week course where the students are using those same lessons, those same products, and then interacting with our faculty in these Zoom type sessions once a week. The second part, which was a little bit more challenging, was at the same time, the SOCOM headquarters had the comprehensive review for the SecDef, and they were being challenged with, hey, you need to start doing a design process immediately on these challenges. And they were decentralized just as us. So we started using different design platforms online with a combination of this and Zoom to live facilitate in groups. And so what that is now fed into is it's helped spawn the Canadian Forces College, how they do their design education. They've basically mirrored ours. And then most recently, the National Defense University's Eisenhower School, their faculty are implementing a version of what JSOU has kind of set as proof of concept. And they're executing that this week, in fact, with 288 of their full-bird kernel students. And then lastly, we are doing these types of implementations into flipping or moving into the virtual, our basic and advanced design courses right now with pilots.
Right after the implementation of telework in the wake of COVID-19, what were some of the initial challenges you had to work through when everyone started teleworking?
So for us, once again, we were in an advantage because all of our material, all of our lessons, all of our stuff was online. But at the same time, we started trying to experiment. Okay, let's take a team of 5 or 6 students in this telework structure, and let's start doing some of the design activities that we would normally do in the classroom. And what we learned was, and you know, we have a whole list of these lessons learned on this live facilitation. The first thing was that virtual design facilitation takes 3 times as long as live in residence. And what I mean by that is if any of my faculty are doing design on a challenge, whether they're at Little Creek or they're at Fort Bragg or somewhere, or at JSOU in Tampa, we can do so many things with a team with whiteboards in the classroom. The virtual process, by its own nature of this two-way conversation and the distances involved and using a graphics platform. We use Concept Board, but others have used Mural. You can also use Google Jam session or Google Slides. There's also Microsoft Teams whiteboard, which is limited, but you can still do these types of design activities. And this is collaborative. That means that your 5 people plus your facilitator are on that screen making and manipulating those design concepts, as well as you're using either Zoom or Wicker or something else for the audio and the video. The other thing is that this becomes very draining for the students, as well as the faculty. So this will take, if you do 2 hours of live design facilitation, that's about all the students can handle. And we found that any sessions that go longer than that, the students just fizzle out. So my recommendation would be, it takes 3 times as long. Break up your sessions as much as possible. Make sure that your students understand how to use these graphics platforms. So our first day with a design team, it's just them trying out the system, learning and getting familiar with it. And then we bring in the design military challenges for them to work on. And then additionally, there's the two-way traffic thing. I know we're going to talk about that later, but we're doing that right now. So I'll pause here for your comments or questions.
Okay, so you got some virtual live design education moving along after the telework order. What were some of the lessons learned you and your term realized? And how is design education virtual and live different from in residence?
The first thing that came up to most of our faculty, and myself included, is that it takes a different way of facilitating to get all the students involved in participating. Because normally in a classroom, you can see, you can sense, you can see who are the people that are the shy ones or the quiet ones, or they have an idea, but they're not ready to say it yet. And we have all these techniques in the classroom to really bring those people out, as well as when you have those very dominant, aggressive personalities, how to kind of temper them down or do the Jedi mind tricks, if you will. In this telework environment, it becomes a different challenge. How to manage the personalities on the team, how to get at those learning objectives online, how to accentuate some of the voices that are more quiet. One of the techniques that we found was very successful was we have in our 1440 course, not only is there a range of educational options for them. So we have them read articles, we have them listen to podcasts, watch videos, and that appeals to the different learning styles. But we also added in design challenges. So each week the students watch a video clip or basically, a video clip from something completely unrelated, it seems, from the military. And then we ask them to draw and explain this. And so they upload it to, in our Blackboard, to a graphics section. And then when we get everyone together for the Zoom sessions, we have each student talk about what they drew and why. And what's fascinating here is that this really enhances the quiet students, the reserved students, and the discourse between them. It's just fantastic because not only do we look at each individual drawing, but you can zoom out and look at the entire class. And in one instance, we have them watch the famous, the Who's On First comedy routine that we all remember. And we tell them, draw this. And guess what happens? Almost every student in every class draws a baseball diamond. Now they do different types of drawings and they do different explanations, but almost every drawing has the baseball diamond in the middle of the drawing. And so when we zoom out and we talk to the students, we say, why is that? Why is it that student after student, no matter when, and we even have foreign students that don't really know baseball, they draw the baseball diamond. So that's some of the stuff that we've kind of unlocked, that it actually is more pronounced and it manifests differently, more intensely here in the telework versus we might not get that same effect, if you will, in residency.
Well, be interesting to sit in on the, sat in on the design planning of the comedy team that developed that whole sketch, you know. That would have been a fun iteration to watch. Anyway, so you've had a lot of experience with different types of design teams across multiple domains. I mean, you talk about SOCOM headquarters, Spacecom, et cetera. You know, you discuss that in your bio. So did you find these experiences useful as you modify design course implementation in the wake of the virus outbreak?
I think that with everyone in education right now, we're all struggling with, well, how do we do this telework thing? And I even watched my children, at the tail end of this last school year, and the teachers themselves were struggling with, well, what's the best way to do this? And there's a variety of different techniques. JSOU teaches a variety of different courses, and all of those have a different educational focus area as well as methods and techniques, different audiences. Design is a little bit different in certain ways, but what I can offer here is we've found that we learned a lot working with the timings of how long a student should be engaged per week. How are you engaging with them? And when you take something that was traditionally a 5-day course, 40 contact hours, 8 hours a day in the classroom, where do you spread that out? Do you try to replicate it in the same week online? Do you make it a 2-week course? In our case, we experimented with a 6-week course. And what we found was engaging them for 5 to 7 hours a week for a series of 6 weeks back to back was actually quite popular. I don't know if that's going to hold post-COVID, but I honestly think it may. And there's something about that delivery means that for us was very nice. And it also mirrors university semester schedules, which was a little bit different from how we had been doing design education previously. It was normally 5 days. And then additionally, our first live facilitation that we did with SOCOM headquarters, that was where our team really learned the fundamentals of doing the live design, trying out different platforms. Once again, we're using Concept Board, which we use the free version, and that provides us the necessary virtual whiteboard, if you will, for the students to just do all their work on. We know that the Canadian Forces College went with Mural, so I'm not a product voucher here, but I'm saying whatever the platform is that you're going to use, if that works for the topic that you're trying to teach online, there has to be some experimentation and some risk. But then once you're able to build on it, that's where our students and our faculty are really able to maximize this. And you can actually create long-term online education that there wasn't the emphasis for before March.
Okay, so one of your presentations, I note you state, quote, doing design live is not as productive as discussing what you designed live with team interaction on each effort. So could you elaborate on that statement?
Great, and I'm glad you asked this question. So this is the golden nugget that I can offer for this session. This is the most surprising thing that I learned, and I've been doing design facilitation for a long time. What we first started doing with the SOCOM initiative was we'd say, okay, everyone get onto the board, the graphics board. We have everyone up in Zoom. And then we'd give them the exercises we would normally do in the classroom. So we'd say, well, we want you to, for example, let's everyone make a coffee mug that doesn't yet exist. So Carrie, you'd have 15 minutes to draw a coffee mug that doesn't exist yet, and you're going to bring it into existence and explain why. And it's a great little icebreaker exercise just for design or any class. It's kind of fun to see what happens. And what would happen is the students would, just like in the classroom, spend 15, 20 minutes, and they'd all be on the boards and you could watch them working, but it was dead silent because everyone's doing the task. And so what we found was the burn rate of our contact hour or 2 hours with the students was getting consumed by them doing the design. And so we shifted it and said, okay, we would finish the exercise, or we'd finish the hour and say, here's your assignment for the next 24 or 48 hours, depending on when you have your next engagement with them. And we task them to do it on their own, which they can because this is a cloud-based platform. And so the students would then start doing their design work on their own. And then we'd start the session saying, okay, we're going to go around the room and we're going to have everyone talk about what they created, depending on whatever the design challenge is. And so then you were filling the entire hour with everyone's cursors moving on each person's drawing, with them adding comments, making discussions, making chats, everyone talking back and forth. And then suddenly the hour was filled with this incredible dialogue and discourse and challenges and ideas. And it was just all this great stuff was happening. So we've moved a lot of the design facilitation into this, tell us what you did and why you think X, Y, and Z, versus, okay, everyone, next is your next challenge. So that's that nuance that, once again, it doesn't happen in the live residence design education, but it is manifesting here and it's helping us with how to do this virtually.
So you mentioned the importance of two-way traffic virtual courses. Why is that so important in your view?
We're doing it right now. And the challenge is, if one of us is talking, I started out as an 11 Bravo radio operator with a 77 strapped to my back in the day. And it's just same challenge here, is that you can't talk with 5 people at the same time. Now, normally in residence, and this once again is perhaps a little unique to design, but I think the operational planning courses would have a similar experience. When you walk into a room and you'll see on the boards 5 or 6 people and they're all working, and 3 people are doing one thing together, 2 people are on another whiteboard, and 1 person is off in the corner doing their own thing, or they're all talking. And this talking is simultaneous. There's lots of nice crosstalk and all these things are happening. All that is shut down when we're virtual like this. And I watched my poor son's 5th grade teacher try to silence. She's actually muting the children because they're all going crazy with the first couple of sessions they were doing. So facilitators are trying, and educators trying to figure out how do you streamline this? How do you get the interactions going? So this goes back into the discourse becomes almost like holding the golden, or the conch. Whoever's holding the shell, the coconut, gets to talk, and then everyone else kind of has to listen. But at the same time, that can sometimes cause the alphas, the aggressive students, of dominating. And so you have to figure out, how do you get maximum participation? And then how can you get nonverbal activities at the same time? And that's where the graphics board is useful. Now, some of the platforms do not allow you to do comments. And that's one thing I'd recommend to educators. If you're going to use a graphics platform, the comments option, it's available in Mural and Concept Board, for example. It means that if I'm drawing something and talking about it, you and Frank could move your cursors, click on something, draw a thing, tag me, and put a comment, and it would all appear as I'm talking. And it's a little bit more sophisticated than just a simple chat room, which is still good, because this is getting a lot more specific, and it's doing the tagging and it's doing the interaction. And as students get more proficient with this, you can see multiple taggings occurring and multiple comments, and they're all interacting with each other as just 2 people are talking. So this is one of those unique characteristics of how do we do telework virtual education, and enhancing that with these types of techniques is going to maximize it. Otherwise, you might have a class of 20 people and your entire 2 hours is just point-to-point conversation the entire time. You're just not going to have that many people as involved as you would in a classroom. So how do we get around that? This is just one of those techniques, enhancing the visual, the nonverbal, the cyber, the digital, as well as the outside of the classroom engagements to foster greater conversation for that two-way.
It's an interesting analogy, the learning to use the radio at the tactical level. I was a company commander in the National Guard. I remember my battalion commander telling me one time, or asking me, what's your primary weapon? And of course, I replied, my M9. He says, no. He pointed to the radio. That's your primary weapon. And he said, and I learned the hard way, you really want to tick your S3 off, just tie up the net. You know, knowing when to talk and when to listen is a crucial art. So we have some questions. We have a question up in our Q&A block here. Our audience is waking up a bit. So what do you envision post-COVID? Will the online courses continue? Will they go back to the classroom, or we have some combination of both options? So this is your opportunity to kind of go into some detail about the courses we can expect in the future as well, in terms of design.
That's an interesting question because, well, first, I'm a contractor. So in my role and how I support education is that we make recommendations to the overall JSOU strategy. And what I think is that prior to COVID, not just JSOU, but I think across the PMEs, because I have contacts, I have colleagues at NDU, at SAMS, at the Canadian Forces College and international war colleges. There was an apprehension with this distance learning. And some learning was put on, but it was very preliminary. It was very, your easier stuff, like Introduction to SOF is a great course, but it kind of is the quick solution that is applied to anyone who's entering into SOCOM that needs to know those basics very quickly. How do you do more sophisticated, more difficult classes? How do you do an advanced design course or an advanced planners course online? So what COVID has really done is forced us to change, to innovate. And with that, the question now becomes, okay, if COVID just ends with a vaccine, and let's say it ends in 6 months, well, then what do? Do we return entirely back to the classroom? I think that potentially some of that may occur, but what about continuing on these courses, particularly for international audiences of either international SOF or SOCOM units that are SOCPAC, they're pretty far away. It's difficult for them to travel. But if the education is delivered in the virtual that's sufficient for their emergent needs or their current needs, then that becomes the basis for us to say, all right, well, some of these things we need to be able to provide them in this way. And then some stuff just has to return to residents, particularly things that have to be done classified, in that some of the content that we do, there's no way to get around it. It's got to be done in a SCIF, or it's got to be done secure. But I think that if anything, if there is no vaccine, or the vaccine becomes a tricky issue, if you turn it into a process where, just like the flu season, there's the COVID season, then there might be a period where there's a higher degree of residency courses. And then in those other seasons, you have a high degree of this type of education, which means that your faculty have to become dual skilled, and you may have to shift them back and forth between these skill sets annually.
I'm going to ask a question about my own personal observation. So we had, a period of back-to-back deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. We drew our presence down. If we go back to a period of high up tempo, do you think that distance learning is going to be crucial toward enabling people to continue their PME in the future? Our military, folks in the military.
So this could best be answered maybe just philosophically. Russell Aikoff talked about different types of problems, and essentially, and Horst Rill as well. And the consensus is that we stop dealing with problems when we run out of money, interest, or time. So resources, time, and interest. And every single problem basically is terminated that way, not whether or not you reach the solution. And so, or the objective, or the end state, or the goal. And so what's interesting here is think about COVID, think about post-COVID, think about deployments, think about SOCOM and SOF partners and internationals that require design or planning or some sort of JSOU capability, some sort of education, but they can't come to Tampa. And they need it now, or they need it in this period, they need it in a remote location, and they need it quickly. And we can't fly a team there in time, or the money's not there. All of these things are eliminated if we use this telework and this virtual education, if it's available and if it meets that. Because in terms of resourcing, it's cheaper, right? In terms of time, we have great flexibility on how we provide it. And even with right now, we're doing it with international soft that are in a very different time zones. 1900 hours tonight, I'll be doing a design session with them because that's their morning time. We have that flexibility that we normally wouldn't have in that point-to-point residency. And then lastly, in terms of interest, I think that there's going to be an even greater interest because this is an opportunity for organizations that don't have a lot of money or don't have the ability to travel to get some of that quality education that JSOU provides or normally provides either in residence or on a mobile. So it's really win-win for SOCOM, for JSOU, and for all the partner nations on the world.
Okay, so another question here from the audience. You mentioned techniques for getting all students involved in your sessions. Do you have a limit on class size?
All right, so what I can offer to the audience is that this, in my design education, so how we do and what we do, it may not be the same for the topic that you are doing. But for design, we find that in residence, a team of 5 to 8 or 9 is about the most you want to put on a small team. So in residence is if we have 25 students, we break them up into about 4 design teams and then pair a facilitator with each. That's not normally ideal for other courses where they'll have groups of 10 or 20, or they don't break them into groups at all. When you are doing live design facilitation in a telework status, we can do all the students at once if we're doing a lecture style, and sometimes we do that. But most of the time we are pairing them up in small groups online in different Zoom chat rooms and on different concept boards. And so what we find there is, once again, 5 or 6, it's even a slightly smaller number, is about the most that facilitator can handle. And part of that is all the issues that we mentioned before, but also time constraints. Because if you have 8 or 9 or 10 people in a group and you're online and you're slowed down by two-way traffic, and you're trying all involved, in 60 minutes, if you were to have each student talk for 10 or 15 minutes on what they did on topic whatever, that's going to burn your hour fast, right? And so if you do 2 or 3 hours with them, it's going to burn all that up very quickly. And once again, we said that 8 or 9 hours, at least for design online, doesn't really work. For other courses that may, and I think there's different time constraints depending on your context. If you're mostly doing a passive audience where it's you lecturing and presenting, that may be beneficial for large groups. But for some of the more challenging or sophisticated topics that require direct facilitator engagements, point to point with the students, a 5 to 6 student population probably would be where you want to start trying.
Let's talk about the role of facilitators in virtual design. So you mentioned the term design Sherpas. So I'm sure you got that, you borrowed that term from Afghan culture. I've heard that term before. So, and we hear that often in JSOU concerning the way JSOU approaches design education. So could you discuss the role of facilitators?
This is more of a style. And so the JSOU style is starting to become pretty popular with the different PMEs and looking at how our faculty, how our team is doing the design. So what I like to say, and once again, it's my own purpose on how design is useful for education, is there's 2 types. You can have your superheroes, your design superheroes, like Batman and Robin. And so Batman and Robin are really good at design, but what they create, and you see this a lot on the commercial side because it's a business model. So if a business or a SOCOM unit needs design, they turn on the bat signal, the Batman and Robin show up, they provide the design education, and they save the day. And then they say, okay, turn on the bat signal, we need us again. But what happens in those engagements is that while there's design facilitation that occurs, if it lacks the education, so that the people that are receiving the design facilitation are not learning how to climb the mountain themselves, then they're perpetually in the whole, Gotham's under attack, turn on the bat signal, we need Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Right? So the challenge there is that even if you're proficient in doing that, your organization, whether you have a 15-person design team or a 300-person design team, you're going to run out of bandwidth because you're just not going to be able to answer all the bat signals all around the world. We at JSOU, with our approach is we call it Design Sherpas. We are there to help you up the mountain. We are there to carry the equipment. We are there to show you the techniques, but it's about you. It's about your organization. So when a senior leader, when a general officer or a senior leader of a SOCOM unit says, hey, I need design in my organization. I need it inculcated across the organization. We've seen this with the Ranger Regiment. We've seen this with Fort Bragg organizations and other units around the world. What we advise is, look, we need to put long-term education of design so that we are answering your immediate needs. It's sort of the bat signal, right? We're coming to help, but we don't want you to continue to signal us. We want you to grow your own. We want you to have your own superheroes, if you will. You have to climb the mountain, and a Sherpa is not part of the photo. And that's one thing my faculty and I joke about. That when they climb the mountain and get up there to the top, it's about them. So the Sherpa holds the camera to take the photo of the triumph of that team accomplishing that design journey. They're not in the photo. They're not in the center of the photo, right? That's where Batman and Robin want. They want you to call them again. And so what we do is we try to be behind the scenes, to nudge, to encourage, to shape, to nurture, so that eventually these organizations are climbing their own mountains that we might even not know about. And the best part of that is if you establish this network, the people that are conquering new mountains on their own are going to give back to you, to JSOU, hey, guess what we figured out? Guess what we did? Here's a white paper. Here's a report. Here's information on something we tried out. And we can add that into our program. We can develop things. This iterative process of growth. You're not going to be able to maximize that in a Batman and Robin design model. So that's kind of my philosophy on design facilitation, at least here at JSOU, and it seems to be growing for us and helping us with networking across the enterprise as well as with PME that are also design.
Well, another interesting analogy with Batman. I was quite a fan of Batman and Robin when I was a kid in the 70s, and I remember not only did they react to the bat signal, sometimes they had to react to a taunt from the Riddler riding in the sky. So sometimes events force change upon us, changing the curriculum based on, the international events. So can you tell us about the courses that are coming up in the fall that may interest people regarding design?
Absolutely. So once again, we started this Monday with our first 1440 course, 6-week design fundamentals, online, virtual. And what's unique about this one is we've done 5 or 6 already before, but they were closed off to internationals because we had to go through the process of getting the MASL, which is another thing that JSOU faculty will want to consider. If you build the virtual course, are you going to back end the whole MASL process to open it up to internationals, which in itself is a great example of outreach into different organizations that don't have a JSOU. And so we're doing that one now. But we're also feeding into future 1440s. We have one starting in September, and you're going to see only internationals for other organizations, onesies and twosies, as well as our SOCOM audience. But we also are going to have a lot more representation from agencies, from federal agencies that now have learned about this education. It's not available anywhere else. It's virtual. It's perfect for their needs, and they're going into it, which is great. So that course is of course available online in the portal for registration. So faculty can check that out. And if they want, we have JSOU faculty that would like to take the course. They're more than encouraged to do so. And if you've taken a live in residence 3440, our basic course, we've had graduates of that course take the 1440 and say, hey, we've learned a lot more. This was great, because all the content is different. We do that intentionally so there's no redundancy. We have the advanced design course that pilot again, virtual, that starts Monday. We have a class of 25 students from all across the enterprise, as well as 1 or 2 internationals across at J3I. And then that will run for 6 weeks. Then we have we have a 3440, a pilot tentatively placed for October. And Dr. Sean Lux is the point of contact there. That'll be the basic course for us. And we're looking at doing the same type of thing that we've done with 1440 and 4445. And then additionally, Mr. Nathan Schwagler and the creative problem solving courses, all of those are going virtual online as well. They're up in the portal. They're available for students and faculty. And what I think is that faculty that want to take these courses, not only they can get a jump start on these design, or I'm sorry, the virtual, but they can add a lot of things to their kit bag, to include the example of Lego Series A. So that's something that's shown and used in our design courses and creative problem solving. Now we are folding that in somehow into the virtual. And the challenge right now we're working with is, do we mail the Lego kits? Do we have people buy Lego and use it on their end? And so we're working through that, but that's exciting develops around the corner. And I'd like to see how that plays out. So, and we encourage faculty, if you're interested, please join us. Let us know what you'd like to do. If you want to shadow a course, that's great. If you want to attend as a student, that's even better.
Well, I mean, you pretty well addressed the issue that, are we active and engaged, doing great things, doing productive things, even in the wake of this pandemic? And the answer is absolutely. If anything, it's making us stronger and smarter and more efficient. So great discussion, Ben. I think we hit a lot of highlights today. I think it was beneficial to everyone. Anything you want to add? Any final pearls of wisdom you want to pass on?
Well, first, you've clearly shown your age with your Batman TV show references.
Thank you.
There. I was going to also throw in a reference, old school reference to a party line. For those of you that remember those in the day, where not every house could have its own phone line, so it would ring across the entire rural area, and then someone would pick up, and then if you were a nosy neighbor, you could listen in. But that's another metaphor for the challenges in this two-way design education. But in closing, I would offer this. We looked at COVID originally, and I'm speaking very generally. Back in March at JSOU, I know that from various inputs that a lot of folks said, hey, we just need to get to May because everything will go back to normal. And so there was a bit of resistance to changing these things and getting them online. But now once we hit June, it started turning to, look, this isn't going away. So now that we know that COVID or the COVID context may not go away at all, or it may return or have all these for JSOU faculty that are looking to how do we maximize the ability to work in residence, but rapidly shift to a online platform in the case of another pandemic or a continued one. Some of the things I would offer is the flipped classroom model, absolutely something that we lucked out on. The fact that we did it in 2018, we were an anomaly. It was kind of a curiosity. But when COVID hit in March, we're like, heck, all of our classes are already on there. We just need to figure out how to do the facilitation now, which in itself is a different challenge. And then I would say, secondly, we have to look at our talent, part-time contractors and faculty that do this facilitation, whatever the topic is. Teaching online is different and it's harder. And I think it takes different skill sets. So how do we professionalize our people? How do we get them good at this? One of the things that you could do at JSOU is you say, all right, who do we have now that are really doing this well? So there's design facilitation, of course, we've talked about that ad nauseum, but there's also SOP-C that's online. There's the AIR course that's online. There's a couple of the high performers that are really comfortable, that just took to it right away, and they're just figuring stuff out because they're just really good at this. Can we get them to help mentor and coach other faculty and other contractors that need this in their kit bag versus just sending them out on their own? I think there's probably some useful opportunities for us to maximize this, whether it's them observing sessions that we have going on or us doing workshops in this format. So there's just something to think about long-term, because it's an investment in a skill set that we didn't think we needed until March of this year. And now we know.
Yeah, to some degree, this may be the new normal. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. Great discussion. Really appreciate your time today. You're not exactly a stranger here at JSOU, Ben, but I think I and everyone at JSOU have greatly benefited, and we have an enhanced view of how your expertise has benefited our institution. So thanks again. I'd like to remind the audience, if you found our discussion enlightening about design courses in the era of COVID-19, I encourage you to look for the design curriculum and the course dates that Ben mentioned on the JSOU public webpage at socom.mil/JSOU and click on courses. Also take the time to explore JSOU press publications in the past 3 years on this and similar topics. For feedback on Think JSOU or to nominate potential speakers, please contact us at thinkjsou@socom.mil. In the meantime, you can follow JSOU on LinkedIn and Facebook, or you can check out upcoming courses and events on our website, which is www.socom.mil/ JSOU. This series is brought to you by the Department of Strategic Studies at the Joint Special Operations University. Thank you all for listening.